That was easier than I expected. .426 Hemi. We didn't know what it was this morning, and now we got 3 of them.
Multiplying.
Okay, it's really weird this idles now. Oh yeah, anyway, I'm Jamie, this is Dead Dodge Garage, and this is a 1970 Plymouth Hemicuda. You actually may have seen this in a previous video when I tuned it and got it running kinda sorta okay, but the truth is it's never quite been right. It's got low compression in cylinder 1, among other issues. It's just not happy. So today, we're actually gonna take this car apart. We're gonna do the opposite of what the factory did to install the drivetrain and drop it out the bottom. And then we're gonna put this 426 up on an engine stand, break it down, see what we've got inside, and then send it to a machine shop. At long last, I get to build a 426 Hemi, which is very exciting. And then later I'm gonna build another one, but that's this whole other thing. This thing has a Pertronix, and it basically wouldn't start. It would fire and die until I disconnected that from coil positive and added this temporary wire going over to the other side of the ballast resistor. Then it fired up and idled just fine, until it ran out of gas. Hemicuda on the operating table. Time to rip all its guts out. It's kind of hard to see in here. It's better due to the giant hole in the hood, but still kind of dark. Anyway, I took a whole bunch of reference pictures. There's kind of a rule for jobs like this, and that's that you could take like unlimited reference pictures, and it's never enough. But hopefully I got the important details. One annoyance on this car, it's missing the correct transmission cooler. It's got an aftermarket one zip stripped onto the radiator, and the clamps are pointed the wrong way. Tom gave the Hemi a bath. That wasn't me. I didn't do that. I've got the cap and plug wires out. I've got some throttle hardware. Of course, everything that comes off of this car will be bagged and tagged. Here's my temporary ignition repair. We'll definitely be doing that nicely at a later date. As mentioned, we're going to take it apart the way the factory put it together. And what that means is we're going to drop the entire front suspension and the drivetrain out as an assembly. We've got to disassemble as much of the Hemi as is necessary to get it out of the way of the fender wells. And so far, it looks like that just means the passenger side valve cover. Judging by the creaking noises and such, this thing definitely needs some front end work anyway, so this is a good opportunity to do that. Of course, we'll have to unhook the brake lines, drop the control arms out, so the alignment will be messed up and the brakes are going to need bled, but that's okay. You know, I put new tube seals in this thing, so I don't want to talk about the fact that number 3 and number 7 are both full of oil. I already mentioned I did these valve covers, so don't worry about that. Oh, I do still need to pull the plug. Anyway, this needed a retorque that it never got. So just a word to the wise. Retorque your valve covers with cork gaskets. Oil pans too. Really good idea, actually. Absolutely pig-rich terrible, which you may have already guessed if you have like eyes and ears. Passenger valve cover is off. Note, you do have to pull the spark plugs to do that, which is slightly annoying. Note also, a bunch of oil goes down the spark plug holes. They actually make these little drop-in doodads to solve that. Why did I leave the O-rings in the head on this side? Those shouldn't be there. I remember now. I never had this valve cover off. So first, the fact that it's loose, not my fault. And second, the fact that there are extra O-rings shoved down in the hole that do absolutely nothing, also not my fault. This is actually a hydraulic lifter cam, yet it still has adjustable rocker arms. I seem to recall on the other side they were adjusted way wrong. Also, this engine's been overhauled before. You can tell by the shiny push rods and the fancy new valve retainers. Going up. I've always liked this brilliant door protection solution. It somehow magically goes up and down with the lift. Yeah, it's a couple exhaust leaks here. In case you were wondering, this is not the numbers engine. In fact, there doesn't seem to be a VIN on this at all. Well, that's neat. There's actually a temp tag on it. That's a little button thingy that pops off if you ever overheat an engine. Those are installed by engine rebuilders, and if the little button's popped out, you don't have a warranty anymore. It might not be obvious from the pigsty I usually work in, but I don't like making horrible messes. I've got all the transmission stuff unhooked from the radiator, and I'm capping all the different lines and the fittings, and we'll try and keep the red puddles on the ground to a minimum. What do you know about removing Hemi exhaust? I'll tell you what I know. I guess I have a Hemi H-pipe now. Rad. These might be the easiest exhaust flanges ever. So the main way I knew there was something wrong with this number 1 hole, aside from the compression check, the color of the exhaust manifold coming down from number 1 there is completely different. Exhaust leaks? What exhaust leaks? Nice. Oh look, a transmission leak. I removed the neutral safety wire, and now I'm gonna take the column shift linkage out. Don't mind me, just setting a Hemi on fire. These block drains will not budge. Remember, this thing's going to a machine shop and getting tanked, and it'll be nicely restored when we're done, so I'm not too worried about ruining the paint. I am worried about making a gigantic mess. Well, guess I just have to hold it. This works great, except that I got some in my mouth. So that's what that hole is for. It really doesn't seem to matter how careful you try to be. You always want to mark one of your flex plate torque converter bolts because of the offset bolt pattern. Someone has already done that for me, so that's nice. And this, unlike the first one I took out, is actually tight. With the torque converter unhooked from the flex plate, I'm now draining the fluid, again to prevent future messes. Torque converter is drained, plug is back in. Notice, I tightened it down. That way, when this thing goes back together, it's good to go. We don't have to worry about checking the drain plugs. That's a good tip for you. Every time you drain a fluid, even if you're taking an engine apart, put your plugs back in and tighten them. Tom. I've got the brake lines unhooked and the brake system draining. Probably should have extracted the fluid from the master cylinder to make this take less millions of years, but it is what it is. Torsion bars are out, oil filters off, all kinds of things are drained and unhooked. I've got to flop the upper arms and then I'll drop this thing down, get the radiator out finally, unhook the upper shock nuts, and we should be ready to drop the K-frame. So now I'm removing the cam bolts to get the upper arms off, which you do with some kind of tool like this through these access holes, the covers for which I've removed. Note, these cam bolts are installed from this direction and tapped into place. Also note, these ones are upside down. Yeah, we'll be fixing that. Suspension drooped. Nothing to getting the column down in an E-body except 2 7/16 nuts and 3 half-inch hex bolts on the firewall. Drop it down on your head, slide it back, ideally with an assistant to help so you can pry the thingy off the gearbox at the same time. And now we're here. Unless I'm forgetting something, we're pretty much ready to roll a cart under this thing, take the 2 loose crossmember bolts, the 4 K-frame bolts out, and lift the body off. And now we're on the cart, specially built for exactly this purpose. I've got an 1 1/16 half-inch drive socket, and I'm going to use it to remove the K-frame bolts. The moment of truth is upon us. I got the bolts out, I crawled under and knocked the crossmember loose, and now I'm on engine compartment duty, making sure that doesn't end up repeated. Thankfully, we didn't do that, but someone did already scratch the paint, so that's the good news. That Band-Aid's been torn off. So I'm going to fudge this thing just a hair to driver, and we'll be fine. Don't mind me, just taking my Hemi for a cruise. Yeah, I'm going to need like 30 inches. Just do me a favor and don't drop it on me. Okay. Yes. Yes. Oh yeah, buddy. Absolute perfection. It's just that easy. That was almost fun. Almost. Remind me to not leave this loose. If I was really thrifty, I'd save this valve cover gasket for my build. Transmission is off. This revealed a fancy SFI rated flex plate, which as you can see uses 8 bolts to be attached to the crank. That's because Hemi. Here's some interesting street Hemi stuff. Preheating tubes. These are supposed to warm the carburetors for easier cold starting. As you can see, there's only one. There's supposed to be a second one, and what this does is it pipes exhaust up here and then it returns it back down to the pipe. With the second one gone, that does very, very little. And of course, the flapper was wired open anyway, so one way or another, this system wasn't going to work. I imagine we'll be putting correct tubes back on here, and they'll probably leak, like Chrysler intended. Need more hands. There we go. Neat. Of course, the reason they need the heat tubes is because there's no provision on the head for exhaust to cross under the intake like on their other engine families. Just notice this. I wasn't ever going to do much anyway. There's some kind of plug in there. I've got the leaky right manifold off, and things are starting to make sense. There's just a chunk of the gasket gone, so there you go. I don't know what this was. Kind of seems like it's just cooked paper. Whatever it is, don't use that. Use Remflex like it has on the other side, because the other one of these must have blown out a decade ago. As gigantic as this left side exhaust manifold is, it actually fits out pretty easily, at least with manual steering. Why is there always more coolant? I've got the intake unbolted. I'm going to take this whole setup off together for now. Makes for easy storage, and because it's all made of aluminum, you know. I wanted to point this out. This is the wrong carburetor on the back. We should not have a breather here for 1970. And this was uncovered. In some cases, in other applications, I've seen a vent like this that's not connected to anything allow gas vapors to come out. And then when you try to start your engine, it could catch on fire. And that's never good. So we're going to do something with this. I don't know if we're going to look for another carburetor. Of course, the correct carburetor will be very expensive. We could try and change this top plate. We do have a bunch of regular Carter cores. Or we could also just cap this. But personally, I don't think that's Hemicuda quality work. I didn't say it was light. It's not the lightest thing ever. But it's not so bad. I've got the other cover off, and now we're gazing into the glory that is the 426 Hemi. These things are kind of nuts. It's sort of a Rube Goldberg machine to get these opposed valves actuated. There are extra cutouts in the block here to get the exhaust push rods down here. It's quite something. A lot of weight in this valve train, and it's pretty complex. Anyway, one of the possibilities I was thinking of that could be causing our low compression not running great issue was a flattened lobe, but these lobes for number one look great. So I don't know. We're going to have to keep digging into this thing, I guess. Unfortunately, it's late, like really late. And I got an hour drive home, so now I'm going to go do that. You're definitely going to see more coming up on this project. If I tear this engine down and there's nothing interesting to find, well, it'll go off to the machine shop and you'll see it when I rebuild it. If I find something really cool in there, we'll do another video. Because this is a real Hemi car, all we're going for here is like 100% stock. Stock performance, stock appearing. We're going to make it a lot more stock than it was as far as the nuts and bolts and the little bits of hardware. When we're done, this will be as correct a 426 Hemi as we could possibly build. That's something we do with 440s all the time around here. Here's a Daytona engine. And here's a shiny new six-pack engine. Very cool. Very orange. So that's the plan for the Hemicuda engine. Super, super nice, stock, correct, and right. I've got this whole other thing going on with my 426 though. Have you ever wanted to see someone build a very, very cheap 426 Hemi? Well, I want to see that. So, yeah, stay tuned. Yeah, we're going to have a very Hemi winter around here, and I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully you enjoyed this anyway. We'll see you on the next one. Until then, as ever, thank you very much for watching. And remember, there's a reason they call this thing the elephant. It's huge. I'm sure Tom will have a great time with this horrible mess.